Hello and welcome to our mini presentation on application and interview questions from the Careers Service at Imperial. One of the first questions that you may encounter at an interview could be a rocket or elevator pitch. This could be a very short introductory presentation about yourself and is usually between 30 seconds to 2 minutes long. Round about a minute and a half is the optimal time. In the rocket or elevator pitch, you describe your background, your motivation and interest in the opportunity, and allow the interviewer to see a little bit of your personality. Think carefully about the key points that you wish to get across during this time and link it clearly to the role and organisation. You might use your practice elevator pitch to answer introductory questions such as, "Tell us about yourself," and this gives a nice polished impression to the interviewers. You could also prepare something similar for when you're networking at careers fairs or events in the future. After your rocket or elevator pitch, an employer may want to find out a little bit more about you and also check that you're aware of your strengths and weaknesses. A typical opening question could be, "Why should we employ you?" This is an opportunity to demonstrate your suitability and draw parallels between what you have to offer the employer and what they need. So highlight your skills, knowledge and experience that's relevant to this specific role and match your values to those of the employer. Employers may also be interested in your extracurricular activities and what you've learnt from these. So think about a reasonable range of activities that you've undertaken, but avoid just simply giving lists. Providing a little bit more detailed information about a few points will make your answer more impressive and memorable. Try to quantify as far as possible because this makes it more credible and people can visualise what you're saying easier. Think about also talking about experiences which involve you working within groups or teams, as these sound a little bit stronger than lots of solitary sounding activities. Think about the skills that you've developed as a result of these activities and how that could be useful in the job role. When thinking about strengths and weaknesses, it's really important for self-awareness to evidence to the employer that you know and understand yourself. So avoid cliched answers such as you're a perfectionist or that you always work too hard. I would try to think about things that are weaknesses that you've been able to manage with insight. So they're not necessarily your strongest skill, but you're aware of how to mitigate those in your working career. So you might want to think about your approach to deadlines, time management, public speaking and project management. Is there anything that you would like to improve on? You could also talk about knowledge gaps as well and how you've demonstrated overcoming those. Be aware though of quoting past weaknesses that you've already overcome because you might be challenged at an interview for more current ones. Motivation questions are a key area for the employer to find out what really attracts you to the area that you've applied for and the evidence of your suitability. So this is a really important question to get right, especially when you're applying for jobs which are slightly pivoted away from your main studies. So your response must be logical and structured. So it's not enough to say you've always wanted to pursue that career. Employers want reasons and evidence. So describe any practical steps you've undertaken to confirm the choice, for example, attending presentations, talking to employees of the firm, reading careers materials, attending internships or other training courses and events. And if you're successful in joining this organisation, think about how you'd like your career to develop over the next few years. The employers want to know if you've thought about your longevity at the organisation, and also that you're really enthusiastic and you have ambition and drive in your career plans. So an effective answer is well informed about the routes for development, perhaps gained from looking at employer LinkedIn profiles. Where have people moved on to in 3 years if they're doing well? What kind of extra responsibilities or professional qualifications have recent graduates started to work towards? You then might be asked about why you're sort of suited to a career within that company. So think about the research that you've already undertaken. Make sure you go beyond the superficial, so it's not just looking at the website. Really dig deep. Use resources such as Marketline Advantage, which is on the Imperial Business School pages of the Abdus Salam Library. And you can also find out if anything's changed for the organisation or industry since then. So I'd be looking at the bigger picture. What have they been posting on their social media accounts, especially LinkedIn? What sort of things are they proud about and they want other people to know? So that's going to just make sure that you're up to date with the organisation and the industry and can deal with those types of questions confidently on your application or interview form. Many students will also be involved in either separate technical and commercial interviews, or are going to have this as a section of their main interview. You might also find this coming up more and more frequently on application forms as well. So typical questions that Imperial students have had include, how do you think machine learning could be applied to a scientific domain? What considerations would be made when designing a system to pump water from a river into a tank? And you're immediately called after an F1 race because there's a problem with the engine that needs solving by next week. What do you do first? So these questions are designed to probe deeply into your knowledge and problem-solving skills. You might be asked to think about perhaps protocols, perhaps how you managed a particular project, the design considerations that you needed to take. So go over the key skill sets and techniques that have been described in the job description and think about where you've applied them in your coursework, employment, extracurricular activities or individual projects. How might you explain some of these concepts to non-specialists? You might want to talk through some of your technical examples with others on your course or go back to your course materials. Remember, in an interview or application situation, make it really clear and structured, and especially in an interview, talk your thinking through out loud so the interviewers can see your approach to this question and the factors that you have considered. Competency and behavioural questions are used by employers to ask for specific examples of times where you've used skills or demonstrated your abilities. So these aren't based on hypothetical situations, these are based on real life. Questions like these tend to relate to transferable skills, for example, teamwork, analytical ability, communication or leadership skills. And a good way to answer these is to use the STAR technique. So when thinking about an answer to a competency-based question, for example, can you describe a time where you've had to solve a problem? Think STAR: situation, task, action and results. The situation should give a very brief overview of the scenario, perhaps what was at stake, and should be about 10% of your answer. The task section is also relatively small, again about 10% of your answer, and should describe what needed to happen to ensure success. The action is the bulk of the answer and is roughly 70%. What specific actions did you take and what skills did you use to accomplish them? Be sure to keep the focus on you in terms of the language that you use to describe this. For example, I did this rather than we did this. Think about what went well, what did you learn, and finally, the results or outcome. What happened at the end? Can you put this in positive terms? And again, can you quantify this if possible? The majority of employers that take on Imperial students think quite a lot in numbers. So if you can quantify anything on your application form or interview, that's really going to strengthen and make you look credible. In some cases with the R, you can also think about your own development. So this R could also be for reflection. So how did this experience make you a better scientist or engineer, for example? By using the STAR framework, you'll have a fully formed answer, which will allow you to have a clear beginning and a really clear end, and the interviewer can then see all the steps that you took and the difference that you personally made in that situation. Do be prepared though for interviewers to grill you a little bit more about some of the examples you've used. So some typical follow-up questions tend to drill down and get you to think about things from a range of different perspectives. I quite like, what were you thinking at that point? And then what was your team thinking at that point? And how did you know that? So do be prepared to consider your STAR examples from a range of viewpoints, which could include colleagues and potentially clients or stakeholders. And again, how would you apply what you've learned from this in the future as part of the role that you're going for? So yes, I think there's some really nice little questions there. And then moving on towards the end of this, some employers use strength-based questions as an alternative to competency or behavioural based questions. This is really to perhaps level the playing field and recognise that not everybody will have had a range of opportunities that describe concrete things that they've done. There's no wrong answer to strength-based questions, and it's not always things that you can prepare for in advance. So the answers that you give should be spontaneous, and they should really allow the interviewer to get a feel for what you like and the way that you think. So the interviewer is particularly looking to see what you've enjoyed doing and what your authentic response is going to be. So we've got a couple of questions here. Do you prefer starting a project or finishing it? Are you a big picture or a detail person? What are you most proud of? Sometimes though, when you see a question on an application form or an interview, and there's lots of qualifying words like most or greatest, it can add pressure, as you might feel that your examples aren't good enough. Don't be, because as long as you can explain why the example was satisfying to you, that's enough for the employer. They're not expecting everybody to have climbed Kilimanjaro, for example. So think about, before your interview, think about what you enjoy doing, what sort of makes a good day for you, what skills really bring out the best in you, and what activities. And interviewers may also be taking note of your body language, and that's genuinely going to be very positive if you're talking about something that you're passionate about. And sometimes these strengths-based questions can be used to help decide what's the best fit for you in the organisation if there are a number of graduate schemes on offer. And finally, you may have some unusual questions asked as part of your job interview. So these could sometimes be described as back of the envelope type questions, where you have to use logic to come up with some ballpark figures, or you might have to describe a particular process in detail. The employer is looking for the way that you think, how you approach it, the logic and your problem solving ability. So in a lot of these cases, there's not an exact answer. So they're looking for the way that you would break down these problems into manageable chunks. You may want to look at our case study pages on the website for more hints and tips on approaching questions, especially for the ones that are similar to the first two here. So this is really a very brief overview of typical application form and interview questions. On behalf of the Careers Service at Imperial, I would want to wish you all the very best with any upcoming questions, and don't forget to book into one of our interview lab sessions where you get the chance to practice with other students at Imperial. These usually run via term time and can be booked through our Jobs Live careers system. You may also want to book a mock interview practice, or use Shortlist Me to help with recorded interviews. You can find out more about both of those on the application and interview Imperial College web pages. And from all of us here, good luck.